Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 192 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the second-round podcast that is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd. As always, is the lovely birthday girl, Erin Paulette. How are you doing, Erin?
I'm doing fine, Weer'd. Thank you. I have had a very lovely weekend of people being nice to me and sending me cards and presents, and I just want to thank everyone who wished me a happy birthday. There are like over 220 of you. I probably can't get to all of you. So if you're listening, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. I read every single one of them, and you made me happy. So thank you very much.
Hooray. Erin, you're a big deal.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I had quite a lovely weekend, and I feel that if I go into all the specifics, it'll sound like I'm bragging, and I don't like to sound like I'm bragging. So it's just I'm doing great. I had a great weekend. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I've had a week of a day.
So just today, huh? Just Monday.
It's leading up to. So a few weeks ago, we had our annual boiler inspection, of which, when you live in cold weather, you have a person wearing coveralls come to your home and have a look at the big horrible device in your basement that heats the entire thing. And they will sometimes say good things and they will sometimes say bad things. And for the last several years, they have said, it's running really well, but it is also really old. So be mindful, because the end is nigh. And then this guy showed me, was saying, I'm seeing some signs that it's really starting to fail. But he wasn't able to repeat the stuff and all that. And I was asking him to explain what was going on. Like, he was saying that it looks like there was like some small cracks in the heat exchanger. And I'm like, but what's the, like, this has a heat exchanger? That's not how I picture how this thing works. And he goes, heat exchanger. They have heat exchangers. That's not how you explain that. That's not how you inspire confidence. So I called up the company that services our boiler. And I said, can you send somebody else over just to look over and all that? And that dude showed up, and he didn't even like do anything different. He opened up the file, said, look, here's the picture of your heat exchanger. Here's how it works. And see that part right there that looks way different than all the other parts? Yeah, that's because it's starting to decay. And that's why you're starting to get like a little bit of a minor leak on it. And yeah, you really should have this replaced soon. So that's what we did. I mean, the good news is that they showed up real quick. The bad news is it was like a 3-day job with like lots and lots of people, and we're already gone through drama of, we tried to get a freezer delivered and it didn't fit down our basement stairs. And so we moved everything around so that we could make room for it, and it didn't fit. And so we're not going to move it back because we're getting a smaller one. But then these guys came through like, well, we need to make room. And like, well, I already piled a bunch of stuff over and away. And so it was just a lot of people tramping around and alternate heating methods and a crappy portable water heater. And it's finally done. And of course, also on this day, my wife had a minor procedure scheduled, and so she needed to get a ride into the hospital. And at that same time, my daughter wakes up and says, I have a sore throat. And I'm like, I don't need this. And yeah. And so, my wife I told my wife, like I said, I had a few suggestions. They both informed me that my suggestions were not valid. And I said, well, what do you propose? And they both said, I don't know. I'm like, I'm out. You guys handle this. And so my wife gave my daughter a COVID test, said that it came out negative, and then we finally decided, all right, well, she'll stay home from school and we'll make it work. And it turned out to be not too bad, but still, I was just fried from the word go. And so, yeah, but now things are better. My wife is home and feeling fine, and my daughter is feeling better. That boy, she was grouchy just before we started to record. Like it was a rough bedtime, and we have both heat and proper hot water. So I'm glad your day and weekend was better than mine.
Oh yeah. So, what do we have for the main topic, Weer'd?
We've got, this is kind of a themed show, but more about that later. But first, I just really wanted to give just another shout out to the people of Ukraine. Like Ukraine is, at the time of this recording, is still a sovereign nation, and I'm still not hearing any good news from the Russian front. Like it's just still lots of more bad news for the Russians and tanks getting towed away by tractors. Oh, the tanks getting towed away by tractors. That just every time I see it, it just warms the cockles of my heart. It's like when someone sees a good meme on Facebook. I'm going to steal this, except it's a tank. Or an APC or anything like that. It's like, this is mine now.
So have you seen the picture going around social media about Igor, who apparently found a surface-to-air missile battery that's worth, about $20 million?
Oh, I think I did. This was a while back, wasn't it?
No, it's only a few days ago, I think.
Oh, well, this is not the first one. But hooray for Igor.
It's like, this is Igor. Every morning, Igor goes for a stroll through the nearby forest. Today, Igor found a Russian Army 9K330 Tor SAM system abandoned in the forest. Now Igor owns a $20 million SAM system. And the best part, I don't know how long this is going to last, but somebody has edited Wikipedia showing him, because they got the nations who own these systems, these batteries. Belarus has 2 batteries, and China has 35. Cyprus has 6. Egypt has 16. Greece has 25. Igor from Ukraine has 1.
Oh.
And it's just, it's funny.
Now, here's the interesting thing is, this just popped into my head, is I don't know if you saw the tweet of Elon Musk essentially challenging Putin to a duel.
Yeah, it's some sort of fight. I didn't get the specifics if there were any.
I don't think there were, but I'm just realizing that, because I'm like, Elon's... He's a computer nerd. Like he's not in terrible shape, but meanwhile, like, especially given his age, Vladimir Putin is in remarkably good shape, and for all accounts is a legitimately good, judo fighter. And so, like, I suspect he has both. He knows how to take a punch and knows how to deliver one. And I'm not so sure about Elon Musk, but Elon Musk does have a whole lot of money, and he has, hey Igor, name a price kind of money. He has I'm gonna attack Putin with his own crap that I bought on Silk Road. Oh, no, that would be amusing.
Elon Musk is really about one step away from being the Robert Downey Jr. version of Iron Man.
I mean, yeah.
He's got the money. He's got the snarky attitude. I mean, at this point, if Elon Musk designed a set of power armor and said, from now on, call me Elon Man, I wouldn't even be surprised. I'd just nod my head and go, yes, right, this makes sense.
I mean, let's just say he's already designed a set of power armor. It just either he's just not telling anybody about it, or he's still working on the power supply. He hasn't yet invented the arc reactor. But yeah, no, the whole bit on the, you know, is he Tony Stark? Is he Ernst Blofeld? It could go either way. So another news story that I had very mixed feelings about when I first heard about this, and it has happened since we recorded. I think it was actually a couple of days ago per our recording, so like well over a week ago by the time you guys are hearing this. But Kyle Rittenhouse's AR-15 that he used in Kenosha that fateful day has been destroyed by a Wisconsin police department, and I'm actually quite comfortable with this.
All right. Explain your reasoning behind this decision.
Well, I am always bummed when I hear about a gun being destroyed, like especially with these like gun buyback groups where they melt them down and make manhole covers and things like that. And you see like, you know, grandkids who inherited grandpa's hunting rifles and like, I don't know what to do with this. So they go and trade in, you know, a $300 or $400 hunting rifle for a $50 gift certificate to Target. It's just destruction. It's the broken windows fallacy. It's destruction of wealth. Mm-hmm. But in this specific case, Kyle has openly said he does not want this rifle. There's too many bad memories attached to it. And I can 110% understand that when he sees that gun, he sees that night and probably sees all the trial in the jail cell and all that stuff, and probably Binger pointing it at him, and is just like, yeah, I want no part of this thing. And also, I've got a link in the show notes to when George Zimmerman sold his Kel-Tec pistol that he used to kill Trayvon Martin, and it ended up selling for about $250,000, and it was a media fiasco. And let's be honest, like somebody paid $250,000 for a super duper budget pistol that was used to kill another human being. And it's one of those things of man, I mean, I can see how you get your head around it, but boy, that's rough, because it doesn't even have that level of I may have a Luger that has a swastika on it. You know, does that mean that this was specifically carried by an officer and used to execute people in a concentration camp or something like that? Well, you don't know. You don't know specifically, and you could argue that it definitely has some historical provenance. And I actually, you know, I wouldn't have a problem with owning something like that. But like, to know specifically what it is, and I mean, George Zimmerman had like the cheapest pistol. I don't know if we ever came through what kind of holster he was using, but like he had like bargain hollow point ammo in it and all of that. So it was not, the gun was worth probably $200 at most used, but because of this provenance was going through it. And Kyle Rittenhouse did not want that to happen with his gun, and I do not blame him with that either. So this really does seem to be the only logical conclusion.
I mean, I suppose it could have been stripped for parts and then parted out, couldn't it?
I mean, yeah, it absolutely could have. I mean, you'd still have and then actually, do people know what the lower receiver was and all that? So yeah, in theory, yeah, you could strip it for parts and give it to a place like Numrich or something like that. And so there it goes. And, you know, maybe even go through and make it all quiet. But in the end, you know, it's a Smith & Wesson M&P rifle. There's a whole lot of them. You know, it's not even like a pre-ban gun for people here in Massachusetts and in the other states where we have pre-ban things, where once someone blows up a pre-ban AR, like that's gone. Like you can't just go and buy a new one. This is like they're making them right now, and there will be more. So I can see that, but at the same time, like, it's a $500 gun.
I mean, I understand his reasoning. You know, he doesn't want it, and I also understand that he doesn't want it sold to a collector or otherwise memorialized as history. He just wants it to quietly disappear. And it's his property. He can do what he wants with it. At the same time, I've got that little bit of weirdness of it's still a perfectly good rifle and you're destroying it. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't sit as well with me as it does with you, even though I completely get it and I respect his choice. If it had been me, I think I would have disassembled it, and I don't know exactly what I would have done with the various parts, but, use them to birth other rifles that hopefully would never take another life. But at the same time, that rifle is gone. And while I suppose it would be some degree of possible to put the upper and lower back together, especially with the lower, with that serial number. But, good luck getting the hammer, the spring, the things like that. Mm-hmm. And so it would be historically destroyed, but not actually, one net fewer rifle in the world. So yeah, there's that. And hey, while you were talking, I actually Googled George Zimmerman's holster, mm-hmm. and I found a picture of it. Now, before I post that picture, would you care to guess what kind of holster it was? I'm not looking for a brand name.
I would put solid money on that it was a nylon sausage sack holster, and I'd put even more money on that it's an Uncle Mike's.
I do not know the brand name, but it's absolutely a piece of crap nylon holster.
Wow. Yep. I mean, that was literally walk into a gun shop and I need a carry gun, and how little can I come out with? I mean, I'm just flabbergasted at just the it doesn't surprise me in the least, but and at the same time, also, let me say, as to not flex on the poors, as the kids are wont to say, is that this gun did serve him well, though spending a little bit more money in the holster might have made things a little bit better off, since there was talk that there was at the time of Trayvon's death, he was reaching for the gun in the holster. I don't know, but boy, yeah. That is a nylon piece of crap holster.
So, you know what isn't a piece of crap?
What?
It's the Wave. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were going to answer my rhetorical question.
Well, there's rhetorical questions and there's rhetorical questions. How hot is it?
It's the wave of constitutional and permitless carry that is sweeping the land. So, hey, Weer'd, what's the difference between permitless carry and constitutional carry?
You know what? I really didn't know. And David was talking about it to us, and we were like, he was trying to explain it to us. I said, you know what? This looks like a job for a segment. So, you know what? Let's take it away, David.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Due to the number of states passing this type of legislation and some of the confusion with terminology, Weer'd asked me to put together a segment explaining the differences between permitless carry and constitutional carry. First, a disclaimer. I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, and I haven't stayed in a Holiday Inn Express lately. In other words, I'm not qualified to give legal advice, and the following is only my understanding of these laws. If any of our listeners have questions about the following laws or similar laws in their own states, please consult with a local lawyer who specializes in Second Amendment law. With that out of the way, let's look at the two types of legislation under consideration here. The primary difference has to do with the main direction of the law. If overall, handgun carry is banned in a state unless an individual meets some list of exemptions, but a permit is not required to carry a firearm on their person, that's permitless carry. To clarify, if prior to the change in carry legislation, a permit is an affirmative defense against prosecution for carrying a firearm, and the state later removes the permit requirement but retains the affirmative defense element, that's permitless carry. For example, Tennessee Code Annotated 39-17-1307 is titled Unlawful Carrying or Possession of a Weapon. As stated at the beginning of the current version of this law, specifically subsection A Part 1, A person commits an offense who carries with the intent to go armed a firearm or a club. Previous versions of this law also mentioned knives with blades over 4 inches, but that part was removed. The reference to a club still remains and is not currently exempted under other parts of this law. As Oddball says, he can carry a gun or a sword in Tennessee, but not a stick. The presumption under Tennessee law is that carrying a weapon is generally illegal. This is modified by TCA 3917-1308, which is titled Defenses to Unlawful Possession or Carrying of a Weapon. Specifically, subsection A, part 2, which states, it is a defense to the application of TCA 3917-1307 if the possession or carrying was by a person authorized to possess or carry a firearm pursuant to 3917-1315, 3917-1351, or 3917-1366. Going back to 3917-1307 for a moment, subsection G states, it is an exception to the application of subsection A, that's the part that says it's an offense to carry a firearm or club, that a person is carrying, whether openly or concealed, a handgun, and it then goes on to list the same requirements needed to apply for an enhanced handgun carry license. This makes it very clear that carrying a weapon is illegal unless a person meets these requirements. Thus, Tennessee is a permitless carry state and not, at this time, a constitutional carry one. Speaking of the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry License, it's still available for those traveling out of Tennessee for reciprocity and recognition purposes. I recommend any Tennessee resident planning to carry a handgun get one as a matter of course. This can help avoid unpleasantness if a police officer is insufficiently familiar with the new law, or the individual inadvertently or intentionally crosses state lines while carrying. Please don't misunderstand. The Tennessee permitless carry law is a major step towards true constitutional carry, but we're not quite there yet. On the other side of things, if handgun carry is permitted unless an individual is specifically prohibited, that's more likely constitutional carry. For example, in Georgia, the Constitutional Carry Act of 2021 is moving through the state legislature. If passed into law, the official code of Georgia annotated section 1611-125 would be amended by changing section 2.1 to read, lawful weapons carrier means any person who is not prohibited by law from possessing a weapon or long gun, any person who is licensed pursuant to code section 1611-129, or any person licensed to carry a weapon in any other state whose laws recognize and give effect to a license issued pursuant to this part. I'm going to focus on the first part of that text. Any person who is not prohibited by law from possessing a weapon or long gun. There is no other requirement. All a Georgia citizen would need in order to carry a firearm legally is to not be a prohibited person under state or federal law. Basically, if they can honestly fill out Federal Form 4473 and pass the NICS background check, they'd be legal to carry a firearm in that state. As with Tennessee, a permit would still be available and recommended for recognition and reciprocity. The bill goes on to remove entire sections of prohibitions and replace the phrase license holder with persons who are lawful weapons carriers. From my understanding, this appears to be true constitutional carry. SB 319 passed in the Georgia Senate on February 28th and now moves to the State House of Representatives as HB 2 for consideration. Governor Kemp has pledged to sign this bill into law if it passes through the state legislature. If things keep progressing as we hope, by the end of this year, half of the states will have some form of permitless or constitutional carry. This would be a good position of strength for any future Supreme Court cases. Let's all keep our fingers crossed, and any listeners in states that haven't passed these types of laws, please actively support them as they are introduced, no matter how hopeless it seems. Remember, I used to live in New York, so I understand. Final note, as I wrote this segment, the Alabama Senate passed SB 319, a permitless carry bill, by a vote of 23-6. Since the Alabama House passed HB 272 last week by a vote of 65-37 with one abstention, all that's left is to reconcile some minor differences between them and send it to Governor Ivey for her signature. This is a positive sign.
You see, boys forget what their country means by just reading The Land of the Free in history books. Then they get to be men, they forget even more. Liberty is too precious a thing to be buried in books, Miss Saunders. Men should hold it up in front of them every single day of their lives and say, I'm free to think and to speak. My ancestors couldn't, I can. And my children will. Boys ought to grow up remembering that.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I get them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So David recorded that segment last week, and since then, both Alabama and, on the day we recorded this, Ohio have become constitutional carry, bringing the number of constitutional and permitless carry states to a total of 23. Just 2 more, and we're at half the country. I'm looking at you, Georgia and Indiana.
Well, Georgia, it also just passed their, is it the House? Yes, there's the House. The bill went through the Senate, went to the House, so it's going to the governor's desk, and the governor has been very, very vocal about wanting to sign this bill. So I don't know how long it will take for it to actually go from the House to his desk, but possibly by the time you're listening to this, Georgia will also have constitutional carry. So now, continuing on the subject of imperfect permitless carry, I sat down with lawyer Benjamin Blatt to talk about Indiana's constitutional carry law. I am very pleased to have on the show firearms lawyer Benjamin Blatt. And Benjamin, you're there in Indiana, and you were just telling me something about their constitutional / permitless carry laws.
Yes. So as a little background, I do a lot of firearm work in Indiana, and about 5-6 years ago now, I really got into tracking the attempts at getting constitutional carry in Indiana after I had a conversation with Representative Jim Lucas, who's one of the state representatives. He had proposed a version back then that would have basically said no licenses whatsoever, replace everything with, I don't recall if he called it a reciprocity passport or a reciprocity license, but that was his scheme. And at the time, I had commented back and said, yeah, this is not going to fly. And the reason for that is that when you're doing constitutional carry, you have to be very careful to preserve your state's licensing scheme, because there is a federal law, which is the Gun-Free School Zones Act, which says you cannot carry a firearm loaded or uncased in a school zone, which under federal law is approximately, it's 1,000 feet. So it's approximately 2 city blocks from the outskirts of any federally designated school, which is going to be every elementary school, every high school, some preschools, more limited there. But basically every elementary school, every middle school, every high school, a 2-block radius around the outskirts of them is a gun-free zone by federal law. Unless you have a license issued by your state or your local municipality allowing you to carry within that school zone. So most states have this permit or this license that says you can carry a handgun to some extent in some manner. That qualifies to carry within that federally designated school zone. In Indiana, the license is simply to carry handgun. We don't care if it's concealed or open carry, but it allows you to carry anything that Indiana state law defines as a handgun within that school zone, because it allows you to carry a handgun. Now, Indiana's fun in that the definition of handgun includes SBRs and short barrel shotguns as well as some things you might say, well, no, that's a rifle or that's a firearm, but it's not really a handgun. But the definition under Indiana lets all sorts of stuff in, which is awesome if you're carrying an SBR, because otherwise your standard 16-inch barrel or longer rifle or your 18.5 or 18-inch longer shotgun, you would have to have unloaded and cased if you're passing through a federally designated school zone. So it makes life a bit less of a hassle in that sense. But the point is you need that carry license or permit to carry at all. Otherwise, you're in violation of federal law. So what you want to do when you're doing constitutional carry is basically say, hey, we're going to create a system that says you don't need this permit or this license to carry a handgun if you do not want to get it. But if you want to go through the process of getting it, we're going to leave the existing scheme in place because it has federal benefits, plus it allows you to have reciprocity in other states. That's it. That's all you need. So about 5-6 years ago, the first time I saw a version of this bill, the bill said, hey, we're going to get rid of all this stuff. We're going to get rid of the existing license entirely and replace it with a new concept of reciprocity license that will allow you to have reciprocity in other states. So the big issue with that, first of all, is the Gun-Free School Zone Act, because it's not a license for carry in the state, even though it's issued by the state. It is a license specifically for carry outside the state. So no one would have been able to carry in a school zone. The other issue is that a lot of these reciprocity agreements come in two flavors. One is de facto, where the state says, hey, we'll give reciprocity to anyone that gives us reciprocity. The other is by a specific agreement, typically with attorney generals, that says we recognize that this state's license or permit satisfactorily meets or is close to our own. We give it reciprocity. Depends on the state. It depends on how hard their gun laws are and how annoying they are. So those are the two general forms of reciprocity. But when you say, hey, we've just got this reciprocity license, then you've got to look back at all of those states that have agreements and say, well, do you have reciprocity? Because we didn't agree to giving reciprocity to this form of license. Then you have to look at all the states that grant de facto reciprocity and say, well, do you have reciprocity with us? Because technically, your license, you no longer give our license reciprocity. You say no one needs a license, but you're not giving ours reciprocity. So technically, we can't give you reciprocity on this, even though it's called a reciprocity license. So that's the general problems with this. Ever since that bill crossed my desk, as it were, I have seen similar versions come year after year with similar language. I got more involved in this again last year when I was contacted by NAGR, who wanted me to look at something and wanted a local attorney to take a look at this and comment on it and see if there was anything we could do to fight this in the legislature. So last year's version of the bill, once again, included reciprocity provisions and once again ignored the Gun-Free School Zone Act. On top of it, because, of course, there's this feeling in the Indiana legislature that we can't possibly have constitutional carry unless we satisfy the concerns of the police union. So what the police really want to be able to do is say, hey, we want to know whether or not you can legally carry this handgun, but if you don't have a license, whatever are we supposed to do? So it would have created a separate database that would have been done through our Bureau of Motor Vehicles that would have allowed them to look someone up and check if they have a legal right to carry a handgun before making a stop. Now, the huge problem with that is, first of all, that in the state of Indiana, by our state Supreme Court rulings, and in the Seventh Circuit by the federal rulings, you may not stop someone merely because they are carrying a firearm. That in and of itself is not grounds for a legal police stop. But that is what the police were proposing that they would do, is see if someone's carrying a firearm, and then look them up to see if they were legally carrying that firearm, and then make the stop. The second big issue is that the information that all of these people use, that all of the state agencies use, that all the local police agencies use in every state, comes from the FBI. That same criminal information system is the backbone of the NICS system that is used when you're buying a gun at a gun shop. Part of that system has a specific provision that says the agency using it agrees that this system shall not be accessed or used by any non-police agency. So the state of Indiana proposed that, we're going to have the BMV do this. Well, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles is not a police agency. And as I commented and as I pointed out to the committee, and this was the Senate committee because by that time the bill last year had already passed through the House, well, Indiana might be the first state to be denied access to the FBI's National Criminal Background System for violating the agreement. On top of which, of course, is the huge criminal issue that basically the police wanted a system that will allow them to look someone up as a prerequisite to making a stop without any verification or any record keeping as to when they looked that person up or why they looked that person up. So as a criminal defense attorney, and I do some criminal defense, not a whole lot, but I do some, I'm in a position where when an officer looks someone up in the national database, they have to enter their login. They have to do a search that's recorded. The information requested is recorded. The information that is received is recorded. So if someone is charged with a crime, I actually can verify what was the basis for this stop. And if the basis for the stop was merely that someone did a background check without any other reason, I might be able to say, okay, well, that's an unconstitutional stop. You've got to dismiss the charges. This is clearly unconstitutional. But what the Indiana police wanted was a system that would let them do all of that without any record keeping, which would basically mean that they'd have to go into court and lie about the basis for the stop, which unfortunately would not surprise me, but would allow them to do so without the defense attorneys being able to say, well, no, you made the stop because you looked someone's name up in a record first. because there'd be no way to confirm that. So I took issues with this police state move and also with the Gun-Free School Zone Act issues. And basically, the bill died in the Senate committee last year, but we got a wonderful compromise. We already had from a previous year that the 5-year Indiana carry license would be fee-free. You basically only pay for your background check and you get your 5-year license. As of last year, we had this glorious compromise that you can get the Indiana lifetime license fee-free. So right now, you can get a carry license to carry a handgun in Indiana with lots and lots of freedom, and all you have to do is pay the fee for getting your fingerprints done digitally. That's it. That's a pretty sweet deal.
And
However,
furthermore, I believe, am I correct in the fact that Indiana also has universal reciprocity?
Yes. If your state issues a carry license, Indiana recognizes that carry license, period.
So even though you don't have the constitutional carry, you've got some of the best carry laws in the country as far as the permits that exist.
And we also have a provision in existing law that if you're from out of state and you regularly do business in Indiana, you can request a 5-year license for an out-of-stater. So even if your state doesn't issue a license, if you're in Indiana constantly on business, you can still get an Indiana special license.
Fee-free.
It's pretty good, yeah. I'd have to go double-check that. I don't recall if the out-of-state license still has an attached fee, but even if it does, the 5-year fee was always very low. We're talking less than $25. So that's the deal. Indiana has a pretty solid system in place right now that's completely compliant with federal law, that has reciprocity with a lot of different places. Oh, and that was the other big issue with last year's reciprocity version, is that they were going to say that the license would be issued as a reciprocity license again. And I again raised the point, yeah, it's not actually going to have reciprocity. And unlike in prior years where I just criticized the bill and asked Representative Lucas not to do it this way, because of my education, I went to Alabama, University of Alabama School of Law. I practiced law as a third-year intern in Georgia, and lots of my classmates are spread out all over the South. So I made some calls, and I confirmed that about 6 or 7 states that currently have reciprocity in Indiana would not have reciprocity with Indiana using a reciprocity license because it's only a reciprocity license and fails to meet the statutory requirements of those states. So the so-called reciprocity license would actually reduce Indiana's current reciprocity. So that was last year's bill. Then we came to this year's bill, where they attempted to fix things. The bill author this year, and I'm not going to criticize him too much, although he has declined to communicate with me ever. And the bill has piled on more authors, including other representatives who have declined to communicate with me. NAGR contacted me while this bill was still in committee in the House, before it had even passed off committee to be voted on by the House. And the big issues with the bill this year were basically just boiled down to 2. There's a lot of good stuff in this year's bill in terms of relaxing things. For instance, the off-road vehicle requirements. You know, right now you're not supposed to have a loaded firearm on an off-road vehicle unless you have a license. This would have relaxed it to say that you don't need a license as long as it's a handgun. And there are reasons not to have a loaded rifle on an off-road vehicle, mostly involving accidents. But it would have relaxed stuff like that. It wasn't a horrible thing in that sense. But there were 2 big issues with this year's bill. And they were sort of tied up in the same thing. It basically came down to the reading of it. One is the reciprocity concept again. And again, they didn't say, oh, it's going to be called a reciprocity license. But right now, Indiana has a shall issue state. So if you want a license, as long as you legally can get a license, it shall issue to you. The state police must issue it, period. They changed the language to may issue. But more importantly, they changed the language to say that if you needed a license, the police may issue it if your purpose of getting the license is to have reciprocity in other states. So they didn't say, oh, it's called a reciprocity license, but they put in black and white that the state police will only issue or may issue further licenses for when you want reciprocity. That's issue number 1, because that goes right back to, well, technically now it's a reciprocity license. It's not going to be good in school zones because it's not for carry in the state. I mean, legally you can carry in the state with it, but that's not its primary purpose. So maybe you get through the school zone issue, but it's still questionable and it shouldn't even be that. But you go back to the question of other states. If you're issuing it only for reciprocity, even if it's still valid in your state, if that's not its primary purpose, do you in fact have reciprocity? And that's not a question that anyone bothered to look up and answer. Every year they just make an assumption about that without verifying with all these other states that currently have state reciprocity, would that still continue if we change the editing, if we change the language? Which it's important, it's a very important legal issue. And if you tell an Indiana resident, oh, this license gives you reciprocity, and you go to another state and they say, no, it doesn't, you suffer nothing, but that Indiana resident could be facing prison or jail time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was issue number one. Issue number two was purely a result of bad editing. But they've stuck to their guns so much, and I'm saying it's pride. And I've told people, FPC, Firearm Policy Coalition, I love them in terms of the work they do. They have supported this version of constitutional carry, the House 1077 bill. I have specifically asked them, hey, if I'm wrong, please read this over, look at what I'm saying, tell me where I'm wrong. I gave them details about why I think this bill has issues, where it has issues. They did not get back to me. I would love to be wrong. I would love for someone to tell me that my reading of this bill is wrong, and here's why. No one has done that so far. But people have gone out there on the internet and on radio talk shows and talked about how, oh, no, there's nothing wrong with this bill. Anyone who says it's wrong is an idiot. Okay, well, tell me where it's wrong. Because my interpretation of this bill is it has a language provision which specifically says that for all other people who are not qualified or otherwise not qualified to get the Indiana carry license, you may still carry without a license in these limited functions. Now, why that's important is that one code section, one of the sections of the statute, which is the one that talks about, here's the Indiana license, here's what it can do, all this stuff. It starts with, you do not need a license to carry in Indiana, which is great. That's what constitutional carry should say. You do not need a license to carry a handgun in Indiana. And then it should say, but if you still want to, here's the state licensing scheme. That's the language that should be there. The author of this bill, though, wanted to address the handful of people that for some reason get denied current licenses, but who don't have criminal records. So they put a provision in there that said, if for some reason you are otherwise unable to get a carry license or otherwise unqualified to get it, this is the limited places you can still carry. Now, that language is a carryover from the existing statute. Right now, there's a provision that says if you don't have a carry license, you can carry on private property when people give you permission in certain circumstances. Basically they're saying you can't absolutely not carry just because you don't have a license. You can obviously carry in your own home. You can carry in other places where you have permission. You just can't basically carry out in public. So the whole point of constitutional carry is to basically say you don't need a license to carry out in the public way. That's what constitutional carry should be. The simple, clean form of constitutional carry is one that says you don't need a license to carry a handgun in the public places or in general, but if you need that license for reciprocity, or if you need it to comply with the Indiana state law, or if you just want a license, because you're worried about federal law or whatever, here you go. That's it. That's all you need. But the author of the bill couldn't stop there. So he put in this provision that said if you don't qualify for the Indiana carry license, you're limited to where you can carry. Now, the problem is that he meant, and his intent was clearly, if you don't qualify for the Indiana carry license as that code section is currently written today in 2022, in 2021, the carry license as it's currently issued to someone applying today, if they don't qualify, that's clearly what he meant. And I understand that that was his intent. But the way it's written in black and white in the statute says if you don't qualify for the Indiana carry license as put in this code section. But then you go and look at that code section, which he has edited from shall issue to may issue if you need it for reciprocity. So now the bill reads, you can get the Indiana carry license if you need it primarily for reciprocity. But if you don't need it for primarily reciprocity, you don't get it. And that means you don't qualify for an Indiana carry license. And if you don't qualify for an Indiana carry license, you're limited to where you can carry. That's how the bill reads, going logically from point A to point B to point C, if it's passed into law as amended. It basically does nothing but make it harder to get the current Indiana carry license. You don't have constitutional carry because people carrying without a license still have to show that they can get the license. And the only way to show you can get the license is to actually get it. Now that's a problem to me. But that bill has not been amended to fix that. It passed through the House unamended. It passed through the Senate committee apparently unamended. It's in the Senate committee to basically resolve differences for other reasons. And that other reason is because the Senate version of the bill doesn't have a lot of language that the House version does. But the Senate version is even worse because it basically says that if you're under the age of 21, you don't get constitutional carry and you don't get your license. So you basically can't carry a handgun. The Senate bill is kind of screwed up. It basically says, hey, it's constitutional carry for everyone, except unless you're under the age of 21. And the Senate version, if it's put together with the House version and reconciliated with the House version might result in saying basically that nothing really changes. You still need to prove you can get the handgun license to carry anyway, so you might as well get it because you have to get it to prove that. And, of course, you're not going to be able to carry if you're under 21. The Senate bill also takes into consideration police concerns. Because, again, for some reason, everyone's concerned about the police union, and they want to set up some way for the police to verify whether or not you can legally carry now that there's no longer a license to carry. But that is doubly stupid because both versions in the Senate and the House create a new law, because what is bad constitutional carry without making it illegal to carry a firearm? They create a new law which makes it illegal to carry a handgun unless you can legally carry it. And that's basically how the law reads. And how do you show you can legally carry it? Well, you pretty much have to get your carry license. But, the other big issue with that is, if you're stopped for a criminal offense, generally you have to be stopped for a criminal offense because you might have committed a criminal offense. So right now, as I said earlier, the state courts have ruled that you can't stop someone merely for carrying a firearm. And the federal courts have ruled the same, at least in my circuit. This law would say that it's an offense to carry that handgun until you prove otherwise. So now they can stop someone for carrying a handgun to find out whether or not they're committing a criminal act. And they're calling this constitutional carry. That's what they're claiming is going to be constitutional carry. So I'm a little bit upset about that, and I have a bit of an issue with it. And once again, I'm fighting it, but honestly, this year it might pass that way. And at that point, all I can do is sit back and be glad that I already have my lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Well, that clearly shows the example that sometimes you can screw up a good thing. So thank you so much for sharing your insight on this, Benjamin Blatt.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
So I realize this is an important topic, but about halfway through, reciprocity ceased to be a word for me, and it was just a noise. I'd heard it so much. Does that ever happen to you? Like when a word is used so often, it sort of becomes saturated, and you're going, it doesn't even sound like a word anymore. It's just a collection of odd sounding noises. Yeah, no, definitely. When you get to that moment, and then trying to put it back together is even stranger. Of bringing it back into the word that it belongs to. But yeah, it's reciprocity is an important thing. But boy, we are discussing this a lot because it's important. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Yes. Reciprocity. Yes. And thank goodness, like actually, I was actually sitting down with Benjamin for another segment idea, and he was mentioning, oh gosh, I'm getting more hate mail on this Indiana carry thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, this bill going through. I'm like, as a matter of fact, David is recording a segment on this right now. Would you like to sit down and talk about that? Yeah, no problem. And then so we recorded this before it had passed. And so now it is officially law of the land. He's like, oh boy, he sent me a text message that morning going, oh man, there's going to be some buyer's remorse. First up, thank goodness that Indiana does have their lifetime carry permit. So a lot of the serious gunnies out there have already got their permit and it's not going anywhere. So that is good. But also we got to remember is, while this is very much an imperfect law and Benjamin's points are very, very valid, this is something that can be amended. It doesn't even need to be a new law to do away with this. It just needs to be amended and changed. And I gotta say, I think just the step in the right direction is also good, because there are so many times we see people going through with we're going to get rid of the requirement to have a permit. Oh my goodness, there's going to be people shooting each other over parking spaces, and criminals are going to be able to conceal carry perfectly legally, and all sorts of nonsense starts coming out of just pure blanket ignorant fear. And so this certainly is going to something to do is the sky is not falling in Indiana, though there may be some issues, especially with that the Gun-Free School Zone Act, which I hate that law so much. It is the dumbest law ever.
The law designed to prevent school shootings back before school shootings were even a thing and now have become much more commonplace. So yeah, good job, law.
I got nothing.
You got nothing?
I probably should, but I've look, these guys have talked, well, Ben talked really extensively about it.
Mm-hmm.
And David's, okay, I had to listen to it twice. I get the difference. It is such a fine point that for most people, it's not going to matter.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it all plays out in the functionality. Like, as Benjamin says, the buyer's remorse will kick in. Well, it'll certainly kick in and work through if somebody does get arrested for walking past a school with a, do I say an otherwise legally carried handgun, will suddenly be an interest. I mean, honestly speaking, this could be also a great opportunity for jury nullification as well.
Well, I mean, a lot of cases are great opportunities for jury nullification. Mm-hmm. Why this one in particular?
Oh, just on the jury nullification. I mean, everything is a potential case for jury nullification, but really the law is stupid, Your Honor, is probably one of the best cases of that. And okay, so this person was walking past a school. They weren't in a school. They weren't threatening kids, but they were walking past a school and they had a gun, and it was legal for them to have the gun when they weren't walking past the school. And otherwise it was legal, and somebody 2 blocks over can be carrying the same gun and be walking and totally fine, and they're not causing any problems. And yet here we are sitting in a courtroom. The law is dumb, Your Honor. I motion to dismiss. And I mean, there's so many gun control laws. I mean, I've always said, like, always be careful. Like, if you're carrying with a bunch of people that aren't gun nuts, like, you gotta be extra careful, because people that don't carry every day don't think about the same crap that we think about. Let's go cut through this school playground. Well, that's not necessarily something I would like to do. Hey, let's go stop by the post office. I remember at one point I was taking some friends on a tour of Boston, and was getting in line to go see the USS Constitution, and realized, oh, it's an active Navy vessel. Well, I'll see you guys later. I will be in not the active Navy vessel museum.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, the USS Constitution has cannons, and I believe they're working cannons.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They fire them off every day.
But you can't have a pistol next to the working anti-ship cannons.
Yeah, no, I used to work at a lab in the Navy Yard, and so I would be walking home past the Constitution as she was touch off a full broadside every evening.
So you know who are even bigger guns than the cannons aboard the USS Constitution, Weer'd?
Oh, I mean, you could see them from space. They're the guns on our lovely listeners, and especially those supporters on Patreon. Oh, just look at them. We can see them from here. If you are not a Patreon member for the Assorted Calibers podcast, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast and sign up, because let me tell you, it's worth your while. You can get an early release of the podcast, but there's also blooper reels, the ACP film track, and the ACP mag dump. And let me add, not only do you get to hear the stuff that is being released, every week, but also you can browse through the hundreds of back catalog with once you are a member. It's pretty awesome.
And we want you to share that awesomeness with the rest of the internet by rating us on Apple Podcasts, subscribing to us on the platform of your choice so you don't miss an episode, and sharing the show with your friends, both online and off. Maybe have a listen party.
Oh, listen party.
I know you can listen while you're cleaning your guns after going to the range.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Yeah, pop on an Assorted Calibers podcast. If you're a Patreon member, pop on a blooper reel, and then make sure there's no ammo around, because again, you're not allowed to operate heavy machinery while listening to an ACP blooper reel. You can get more from me at my blog, which is weirdworld.com. That's WeerdWorld.com. And you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
Dang, I promised you guys something last week, and I just completely forgot about it because I was having such a good weekend. By the time you hear it, I should have it done. It was nothing really super special. It's just I was asked to be on another podcast, and this Liberty Blues, I believe was called. It was a primarily libertarian-based podcast, and I got to talk about the usual things because there are people who still haven't heard about me or Pink Pistols or Blazing Sword. Don't know why, but it was less of an interview and more like I was just hanging out with some friends and we were chatting about things. And next thing I know, hey, it's been an hour. We need to wrap up. Aw, man. So that was fun. I'll have a link for you, and you can listen and enjoy hearing me say things I've said a bunch of times before. And I made a promise on Facebook earlier in the week because someone posted to the Assorted Caliber's podcast Facebook page and saying, is this our Aaron Paulette? And they had something from I think it was 2013 or something. It was a role-playing game supplement called Petty Gods. And they had an entry there, and they highlighted the name Aaron Paulette. It's like, is this our Aaron? It's like, yes it is. And I promised that I would say their names on the podcast if they figured out the hidden message/joke that was in the names, and they got them. And so I want to give super dreamy Aaron shout out to Zach Henderson and George Strong. Good going, guys.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
It's kind of petty, but we were talking about Petty Gods, so I'll go with it. I actually have more than a few. One might even say several RPG writing credits to my name. And Weer'd has none. Our writing credits are assorted, if by assorted you include 0. And so is our podcast. Good night, everybody.
Good night.